G'day, it's Mark and welcome back to the channel. In today's episode, we look at the VC Commodore. The VC Commodore was made from March 1980 to October 1981. Visually, it was a relatively minor upgrade with new egg crate grille, revised taillights, and the introduction of some new models, including shadow tone on the SLE Commodore, which was a two-tone paint treatment, and also the release of a four-cylinder Commodore. And this reflected the growing focus of the buying public on fuel economy. The car continued its position as Australia's top-selling vehicle. Improvements also included revised suspension to improve the ride and handling, plus the addition of cruise control as an option. However, the major changes were focused on redesigned cylinder heads to improve fuel economy and engine performance, because Holden was still making do with some very outdated six-cylinder engines, some of which were around 17 years plus old at the time. Improvements in the six-cylinder engines included a new single intake and exhaust port for every cylinder, improved intake and exhaust manifolds, new camshafts and pistons, and an all-new carburetor called the Rochester Verajet, as well as the fitment of electronic ignition. All of these upgrades resulted in improvements in performance of up to 25% in terms of power and 15% better fuel efficiency. So those are very impressive numbers, but I think what that tells you is it started from a low base, and it was telling in terms of the inefficiency of the engines that were released during the VB Commodore series. Not that it made any difference to performance, but the engine blocks were now painted blue instead of red, so they were known as the Blue Motor. Being the early 80s, there was a huge focus on fuel economy. Some might say at any cost. Many companies moved their reps out of six-cylinder cars and crammed them into small four-cylinder cars. And this led to, apart from a lot of dissatisfaction of the sales reps driving the cars were not efficient because they were fitted with air conditioning, generally were automatic, and covered large distances. And to cash in on this market with the downsized engines, Holden released in the VC Commodore a new, in inverted commas, 1.9 litre inline four-cylinder engine, which was known as the Starfire 4. The new engine was the 2.85 litre six-cylinder inline blue engine with two cylinders locked off. It was also used in the UC Sunbird, and this engine was fitted to the Commodore in response to increasing pressure from the 1979 energy crisis. The new engine, however, was not a complete success, as its lack of power meant that the engine needed to be pushed very hard to deliver acceptable performance, and this often led to poor fuel consumption. So this engine was unique to Holden, and it was not one shared with either the Opel Rekord or the Vauxhall Carlton. The new model series comprised the L, which replaced the unbadged base model, the mid-range SL, and the SLE flagship. At this time, the HZ Holden models were also discontinued in 1980. However, there were still a range of Holden WB commercial vehicles, as well as the luxury Holden WB Statesman. So the Commodore L was fitted with the 2.8 litre six-cylinder engine as standard. The SL was fitted with the 3.3 litre engine. The SLE also had the 3.3 litre six-cylinder engine. The Commodore L Wagon had the 2.8 six-cylinder as standard, and the SL had the 3.3. V8s were optional in all models, except the L. I talked before about the power of the engines and that the fact that VC had upgraded from the previous VB. But just to give that in a little bit more context, the XT5 3.3 litre 6 made 83 kilowatts of power, and that was up from the VB output of 66 kilowatts. So it just shows how low the power was at VB. And this engine, this 3.3 engine, had not been upgraded substantially since it was released in 1964 as part of the EH range. Fuel economy had also improved, but this was part of the dilemma that Holden faced when compared to the XD Falcon, which was had been released in 1979. During one road test, where the cars were really driven sparingly for fuel economy, a manual Commodore 3.3 got 24.6 miles per gallon. And on the same test, a 4.1 litre alloy head XD Fairmont gear automatic got 24.8. So a fully loaded gear automatic was actually more economical than a manual 6-cylinder 3.3 Holden. And Ford really played on this in terms of saying, why settle for a smaller car? They were trying to compare the Commodore to a Cortina type vehicle. They're saying, why settle for a smaller car when you can actually have an XD Falcon with an alloy head engine that has better performance and better fuel economy and more space? It's almost like there was no downside. I think dynamically the Commodore was a better handling vehicle, no doubt, also much smaller, but I think that was its main advantage. But outside of that, for a family car, the Commodore, despite retaining its number one spot, but that was, time was limited for that because the XD really was providing a better package to the market, and the sales started to reflect that. The Commodore Wagon continued on from its release at VB. It used German quarter panels. It was still a very small wagon, particularly now compared to the XD Falcon. And I think the other thing to remember is that a lot of wagons were also used for towing. Around 58% or 60% of Falcons were used as tow vehicles. And of that total sales, about 60% of Falcons were sold to fleets. And fleets saw that the Falcon wagon, again, had a much larger load capacity compared to the Commodore. And this meant that in terms of fleet sales, Falcon wagon started picking up more volume. The Commodore was also touted as being aerodynamic, although I'm not aware of what the actual aerodynamic CD figure was. From an interior point of view, Holden also waxed lyrical about the fact that the car had at least 10 vents for interior comfort. When going through the model range, the Holden Commodore L had the standard 2.8 litre 6-cylinder engine, 4-speed manual transmission with console-mounted gear selector, power-assisted front disc and rear drum brakes, rack and pinion steering, the radial-tuned suspension, electrically heated rear window, centre console with parking brake handle, column-mounted control stalks for turn signals, windscreen washers and wipers and headlight dimming, as well as flashing, illuminated glove box compartment, ashtray, cigar lighter and luggage compartment. The car was also fitted with the 14-inch wheels, although the 4-cylinder Commodore only had 13-inch wheels. The Holden Commodore SL upgraded the standard equipment from the L with the 3.3 litre 6-cylinder engine, Trimatic automatic transmission with console-mounted T-bar control, power-assisted brakes, front disc, rear drums, the rack and pinion steering as mentioned before, the radial-tuned suspension, the same 14-inch steel wheels with 14-inch tyres, although with chrome trim rings instead of just the steel wheels, tinted glass all around, the heated rear window per the other base model, as well as the other features. Cord cloth upholstery was also standard on that as opposed to vinyl upholstery in the L. There was also an oil pressure gauge, a fuel economy gauge, which was a very large gauge right in the dashboard where you'd expect to see a tachometer, but that was a big focal point, and I think reflected the early 80s, but something that really was not desirable from my point of view, having this giant big econo gauge. And look, Holden wasn't the only company that did that. The SL also had dual control exterior mirrors, a vinyl spare wheel cover, and the hazard warning flashes. Additional gauges also included a voltmeter and a quartz electric clock. The SLE had been downgraded where it had the standard 4.2 litre V8. It was now a 3.3 litre six-cylinder engine as standard. Also the Trimatic automatic transmission with that engine, with the T-bar centre console, four-wheel power disc brakes, a single-spoke steering wheel, which Leo Pernod was inspired by Citroën, power-assisted rack and pinion steering, the rail-tuned suspension, 15-inch alloy wheels, twin speakers for the stereo system, power antenna, automatic retractable antenna as well when the radio was switched off, laminated windscreen with a tinted band, tinted glass all around, electrically heated rear window, a centre console with an armrest, covered storage compartment with parking brake handle, plush velour upholstery, column-mounted controls for on the stalk for turn signals and headlight flashes and so on. Front reading lights, rear reading lights, full instrumentation which included a tachometer, dual remote control mirrors, cut pole carpeted luggage compartment, and also cut pole carpeting for the interior passenger area. There's also quartz halogen headlights with the headlight washer and wipers. I always liked those washer wipers. I'm not sure how effective they were. Also integrated air conditioning, AM/FM stereo radio with cassette player, height adjustable driver's seat, variable intermittent windscreen wipers, remote control luggage compartment release. The SLE was certainly a very nice package. And a real highlight, I think, also was the shadow tone two-tone paint treatment. The shadow tone colours available were black over Aztec silver, Magnum silver over Aztec silver, sandalwood over Torquay sand, sage green over mist green, nocturne blue over Atlantis blue, and dark carmine over firethorn. There were also single-tone colours available in the SLE as well. While not available at the dealers, aftermarket, there was also a Garrett turbocharged VC Commodore. And here's some images here. This looks quite smart with the two-tone treatment, the intakes in the bonnet, and then you can just see a bit more detail here around the interior and the engine. These were not Holden dealer team models, and I'll get into those shortly, but an aftermarket. I don't know how many were made, but I'd say it would be a very small number. The Garrett Turbo was fitted to the 3.3 litre six-cylinder engine, included wastegate, oil cooler, thematic fans, heavy-duty radiator, heavy-duty clutch, claimed performance of 0 to 100 kilometres an hour in 8 seconds, 0 to 100 in 18 seconds, and a 220 kilometre per hour top speed while delivering 22 to 26 miles per gallon. I'm sure not if you were giving it the herbs. Options on those were, they had sports seats fitted standard, but you could also order things like Recaro front seats, air conditioning, power steering, Pirelli tyres with Compomotive wheels, and also automatic transmission with a transmission cooler. Big news in the VC model was the release of the HDT Commodore, headed up by Peter Brock. HDT was probably similar to an operation like a Carroll Shelby, where the vehicles left the manufacturer, were sent to specific workshop and were modified with performance wheels, suspension and engines, gearboxes and so on. These cars really lifted the image of Holden. They were very, very popular, albeit, very limited numbers were sold. But they, particularly against a background in the 1980s where it was all about fuel economy and four-cylinder engines, having these high-output 5-litre V8 performance cars was a breath of fresh air for enthusiasts. These VC Holden dealer team cars came about from the need to fund the newly purchased Holden dealer team race team. Vin Keen and the network of Holden dealers around Australia got together to form a group that would sell road cars that were designed and built by Brock. Now, I want to clarify something here. The specification may have been nominated by Peter Brock, but the cars were not designed by Peter Brock. Leo Pernod did the styling of all the HDT vehicles, apart from when Peter Brock ended up splitting off from Holden with that famous or infamous director model. The idea was that the sale of these vehicles would fund the race team, and this led to the creation of HDT Holden Dealer Team Special Vehicles. There were 3 colours made available after the initial prototype car, which was a two-tone malachite and sage green vehicle. Although Vin Keen had donated a blue VBSL as a prototype, which formed the basis of the cars that we know today. But the cars, in terms of production cars, the cars available were, there was 3 colours: Palais White, Firethorn Red, or Tuxedo Black, which were based on the Marlboro Cigarette Company colours. I must say I like the black the best. All vehicles featured the carmine red coloured interior and were all SLE based. So it came with the crushed velour, air conditioning, the front headlight washer wipers, chrome trim, including on the outer edges of the grille, central locking, front and rear reading lights, electric windows and dual exhaust system. A distinctive 3-colour stripe was also put on the vehicles, which went down from the front of the car to the rear of the back doors. Some owners chose to delete those, but it was all part of the package, so I think they look better with it. 500 of the vehicles were built, and the cars were available with either the M21 manual transmission or the Turbo 350 3-speed automatic. And engine improvements to the 5-litre engine included a new cold air induction system, which drew air from behind the passenger side headlight, chrome air cleaner lid and rocker covers, as well as gas-flowed cylinder heads and port match inlet manifolds. Other custom features were the Holden Dealer Team footrest, the Momo steering wheel, and this Momo steering wheel is interesting because that's where the build number of the vehicle was located, as well as some suspension work to make the cars handle better than the standard vehicle. The public's introduction to these cars was at a race at Calder Park in 1980, which was referred to as the Race of Champions, where various local and international racing car drivers took part in the race. There were actually 2 race series where these cars competed, and they were fitted with roll cages and hand-numbered steering wheels, as the wheels didn't arrive in time to be properly engraved. Peter Brock's car, number 7, was the only black car in the field, and all of these cars would be later sold off to the public through the HDT dealers. The 5-litre engine had a compression ratio of 9.2 to 1 and maximum power of 160 kilowatts at 4,500 revs and 450 newton meters of torque at 2,800 revs. The cars had a 4-barrel Rochester carburetor, and as I said earlier, with port-matched inlet manifolding, the HDT cold air induction system, and the chromed air cleaner lid. Wheels and tyres were the 15 by 7-inch Ermshire alloy wheels with Uniroyal steel radials. I think those Ermshire wheels were a really nice looking wheel. They really suited the car, gave it a really nice distinctive look, to set it apart from the standard Commodores. Plus there was also obviously a body kit with a rear spoiler and wheel arch flares as well. But the cars looked, they really did stand out, and they were a good-looking car, and it was refreshing to have a nice V8 performance car available in, what had been a pretty austere time for many enthusiasts. Pricing of the car was $19,800 for the manual and $20,000 for the automatic, which was quite a bit of money back in those days. Well, performance is relative, but back in the day it was seen as being pretty good. But 0 to 60 kilometres an hour took 3.8 seconds. 0 to 100 kilometres or 0 to 60 miles an hour, 8.4 seconds. So not a speed demon by any stretch. And 400 metres, quarter mile in 16.1 seconds. But still, for that time, it was actually regarded as pretty good. As part of the striping package, the cars also had on the rear quarter a wreath with Peter Brock's name. Peter Brock, just for those that don't know from overseas, was a very well-known, famous Holden racing car driver, won many Bathurst races and other races. And the decal on the quarter panel showed that he was the the winner of the Australian Touring Car Championship in 1980. Despite the fact that Holden had officially pulled out of racing, mirroring what Ford had done, the HDT, or the Holden Dealer Team Racing cars, competed in a variety of races around Australia, and there were also a number of other privateers and other sponsored vehicles that also competed, driving the VC Commodores. And it meant that, the Bathurst race and other touring car races were still kept alive, going up against, privateers driving Ford Falcons. Getting back to the production cars, it's also noteworthy to mention that during the VC production, the 4 millionth Holden was manufactured by General Motors, and this car was a VC Commodore SLE Shadow Tone, and it was driven off the Dandenong assembly line on the 2nd of June 1981. I actually worked at the Dandenong regional office for 6 months or so when I was in Victoria working for Holden on a transfer. The VC Commodores were built at the Adelaide Assembly Plant in Elizabeth, the Melbourne plant at Dandenong, Acacia Ridge plant at Brisbane, and also the Wellington plant at Trentham. Again, I worked at the New Zealand Trentham plant, although by then the car manufacturing had stopped. Also, there were some CKD completely knocked down kits sent to Indonesia. In terms of the rest of the Commodore range, the colours included flamenco red, Panama green, tulip yellow, pearl grey, torquay sand, mist green, nocturne blue, malachite, which was a very dark green, Tiffany blue, Atlantis blue, firethorn, and sandalwood. Saddle tan, nutmeg, dark carmine, magnum silver, sage green, Aztec silver, tuxedo black, and palette white. The other colours you can see here, the Corinthian blue, the Palomino, Cortez red, and La Palata silver were only available on the Caprice. A total of 121,807 VC Commodores were produced. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode on the VC Commodore. Please make sure you give the episode a thumbs up and also hit that subscribe button if you haven't already so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.